memories of the past, of times gone by. The things that existed then are now extinct. Back in the day, early in my career in the travel industry, airline tickets, they used to be handwritten, carbonated security paper. It was glossy and all. Your flight ticket would contain coupons for each leg of your journey. The industry abbreviation for these coupons were FC1, FC2, like if you were holding a round-trip ticket. Well, that's all gone now. But I was reminded of this abbreviation, in building these foundational columns. This is FC1. It's a story from not that long ago. These two guys, Neil Cassady and Jack Kerouac. The times, 20th century post-war America. The two met at Columbia University, New York. You will see how the story links up, if only in pattern form, with the Francesca tale. That is to say, if we were to start with the consideration that each one of us are stars in our own way, unique individuals. Here in the case of Neil Cassady, he seems to be someone who exemplifies this idea of, stars, and then there are shooting stars among us, the exceptions among humans. These are the kind of folks you meet who leave this indelible mark on your heart, this indicia. And some of them, depending on place, time, company of their existence, they get into the history books. They become immortal. Now we can always question the legitimacy of this immortal status. We look at, for instance, how consequential they have been in terms of a contribution to humanity, to society. But some of them shine so bright that even without any of these contributions, they still break on through to the other side of time and space. Neil Cassady is one of those characters. The irony is that he wanted to be a writer, but instead became the subject matter of literature and a few films as well. Now there's enough information on Neil Cassady, biographical videos made of him. And so for the purposes of my point here, I will touch on his life briefly, which is to say, he had a difficult childhood, adversity, circumstances, and as a result of being in trouble so often, he had spent quite a bit of time in detention, and often he'd have access to libraries, spend time reading the great books of philosophy, thinking, arts, history, culture, and had this gift to consume it but also understand it. He was capable of quoting from it fluently. So when he was introduced to these few students, including Jack Kerouac, at Columbia University, they were impressed with him. He was considered a sort of hero. Jack Kerouac, too, at that time, was an aspiring writer. It seems like he was searching for a subject. He didn't know what to write about. And so the story goes that Jack and Neil, they end up taking a road trip together from New York to San Francisco. And Jack ends up writing this book titled On the Road. It was about their travels, the experience. The book does extremely well. It ends up being a bestseller and now considered in the category of classic in American literature. I got to know about Neil Cassady because of a song which was written and sung by the Grateful Dead as a tribute to Neil Cassady. Neil had gotten to know the band members of the Grateful Dead. I found this video on YouTube where Jerry Garcia is recalling his memories with Neil Cassady. Okay, in terms of Neil Cassady's contribution, in terms of anything tangible, there's really nothing to show for it. And yet, he remains this timeless hero. I don't know if it would be out of place to ask, if you will permit me, please. Just this one thing. In terms of this content, its context. Do you know how we say it's good manners? It's polite not to be judgmental. We leave all of our prejudices, biases behind, especially when listening to these kind of stories, because to enjoy it in its purity would be to keep an open mind. Jack Kerouac's book, On the Road, it paints a picture of a particular time in America, post-war, through the lens of what we have come to call a member of the Beat generation. So let's consider here. The establishment, they had laid out a set of guiding principles on how a man should pursue happiness, which would be employment, a 40-hour work week, a home in the suburbs, wife, couple of kids. But this prescription didn't work for everybody. You might say there was this silent rebellion. I think one has to consider the post-war trauma. This group of folks, counterculture, for them, the pursuit of happiness lay on a different pathway. It seems like there was this curiosity for a spiritual connection. Best description that I've heard about the Beat generation is that these are folks who were trying to synchronize their heartbeat to the beat of the cosmos. And through this search, this attempt, they were hoping for some sort of a spiritual breakthrough. But of course, we all know how the story ends. It was a collision, if we have to place it in allegorical form, between man and the machine. The machine viewed it as an infirmity, an invasive species that needed to be contained, cured, or eradicated. And in this effort, which was somewhat successful, they were able to label this group as the beatniks. Could we look back and say there was confusion, there was misunderstanding, there was a certain lack of empathy? Here's a video of Jerry Garcia. He's recollecting his memories of Neil. To listen to Jerry is heartwarming and hilarious. At the end of that segment, I will play Cassady, this song by the Grateful Dead.
Was that guy. I mean, he just could do that. You know, that's who he was. You know, he was that guy in the real world. You know, he was this you know, he's so he was such an overwhelming trip. Cassady, I don't know. It's hard to even know what to say about Cassady. He was so singular. I mean, it's just, well, for one thing, he was like the best, the ultimate sight gag person. You know what I mean? Physical comedy person. You know. Plus, he was also the world's best stand-up comic too. He had an incredible mind. That he would do this thing. He did it to everybody. Everybody has reported on this. He did it to everybody. You might not see him for months, you know, and he would pick up exactly where he left off the last time he saw you. You know, like in the middle of a sentence, he would pick up and you first of all you go, what the hell? And then you realize, oh yeah, this is that story he was telling me last time. Most people I know didn't understand him at all, you know. But he was like a musician in a way. I mean, he liked musicians. He always liked to hang out with musicians. That's why he sort of picked up on us and me, and we hung out together a lot. And he liked the company of musicians.
When you were living in Hague, was he around during that period?
Yeah, he was off and on. He stayed up in our attic when we were in 710. He had a little camp up there, you know, with a mattress, and his old Cheetos, his old jeans, and stuff like that were up there. And he would come in and hang out for a week or so every month or so, you know, every couple of months maybe, you know, he'd come in and driving. Yeah, if you go for a drive with him, it was like the ultimate fear experience, you know, that you knew you were going to die, and there was no question about it, and it was something so unbelievable. He loved big Detroit irons, you know, big cars. And he like driving in San Francisco, he would go down those hills, you know, like 50 miles and 60 miles an hour, and do corners, you know, blind corners going down those hills. You know, if you can imagine, like going down Franklin, you know, like top speed, you know what I mean? You know, disregarding anything, stop signs, signals, all the time talking to you, and also tuning the radio maybe, and also talking to whoever else is in the car, and it never seeming to ever put his eyes on the road ever. You know, and this is like you'd be just dying. You know, you'd be dying, and he would it would effectively take you past that whole fear of death thing. You know, it's like a difficult experience because there's nothing else like it, apart from like almost like surviving an airplane crash, possibly, or something. I don't know what, but and I mean it was just so incredible. You know, and just his output. You know what I mean? And he felt he was the first person I met who he himself was the art. You know what I mean? He was an artist, and he was the art also. And he was doing it consciously as well. You know, so he did things. He worked with the world. I remember one time after off of Western, you know, way the hell off somewhere funny in Los Angeles, and they had a little house and. We had the bus there, and a bunch of us are sitting on the lawn, and we're all kind of crunched from being up all night, stoned on acid. You know, it's like the dawn. It's Sunday morning now, the dawn, and the bus is parked across the street. From our point of view, we're on the lawn, and it's Sunday morning early, and here's Neil. You know, and he's ripped his shirt off. He has no shirt on now, and now he's no shirt, no shoes, and these funky old chinos they always have. They're always like just about to fall off. You know, and he's. First of all, George Walker's driving the bus. So George is driving the bus. And Neil is like the guy directing him into the parking place, you know? You know, a little to the left, a little to the right. He's doing it all with signals. And he directs him right into a stop sign, an arterial stop sign. It knocks it, it shears it off. Boom, and the stop sign falls down. So then Neil gets up. So then the bus is parked, and Neil gets up and he's got the stop sign, you know? And he's like kind of trying to make it stand up, you know? And so he's there with this stop sign, and down the street come like two really straight little old ladies, you know, and they're on their way to church Sunday morning, you know. And here's Neil, he's like the cosmic village drunk, you know what I mean? He's like, and he's got the stop sign, you know, and they're trying not to see him, you know, and he's doing this whole series of kind of like, good morning, ma'am, you know, kind of pantomime, you know, this extravagant thing all the time with. He would kind of like stand up the stop sign and then walk away from it and it'd start to fall, and he'd grab it just as I'm about to hit, you know, and all this stuff happening. It was like amazingly great. It was just beautiful, perfect timing, you know, and it's just extraordinarily beautiful, you know, and the way his body moved, the way he looked and everything like that was just absolutely, his face is so expressive. He would go through millions of expressions, just millions of them. And just his whole body language and everything was so communicative. It was just amazing. It was I was dying. I thought I was going to die. It was so hilarious. And it was absolutely perfect. You know, it was like a little silent movie, a silent ballet. You know, in the morning. It lasted about maybe a minute and a half. You know, 2 minutes, but it was perfect. You know, it was like a perfect moment. It was just great.
Speaks his name and where you were born to me.